Do you know what breaks a man down the fastest? It's not losing a job. It's not getting divorced. It's that crushing feeling of, I'm worthless. A man who once stood strong his whole life after a single blow loses his wife, his child, his place in the world, and suddenly he collapses like he was never strong at all. No more drive. No reason to get out of bed in the morning. He looks in the mirror and doesn't recognize the man staring back. In America, there are millions of men like that. They used to be the hero in their family. Now they're just a quiet shadow. They used to be the backbone. Now they're the outsider in their own home. And they're giving up silently. No one sees. No one knows. No one's reaching out to pull them back. But if you're watching this video, it means you haven't completely fallen. There's still a spark in you. And I want you to keep watching because in the next part, I'm going to show you how the Stoics walk through the darkness, not just to survive, but to come back stronger. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and like if you're new here. It helps me keep bringing you more valuable content. One day, everything collapses without warning. The once cozy home is now an empty shell. She walks away without looking back. The child no longer calls. The job you held for 20 years vanishes in a single email. You stand there, watching your life fall apart without understanding what's happening. Everything that once defined you, family, career, fatherhood, disappears as if it never existed. No one teaches you how to live after a divorce. No one tells you what it feels like when your child rejects your hug. There's no class that teaches men how to fail without being crushed. You grew up with a simple definition. Success means control. Control over your finances, control over your family, control over your image. And because you believed that for so long, when life falls apart, you don't just lose a part of your life, you lose your entire sense of self. You were never prepared to lose. Because in your mind, a strong man is not allowed to fall. But in Stoic philosophy, there's a concept called externals, and that's the root of suffering. Epictetus once said, "It's not events that disturb us, but our perception of them." You're not in pain because you lost your wife, your job, or your child. You're in pain because you identified yourself with those things. When life strips away those possessions, there's nothing left for you to hold on to. That's the trap of men who don't understand what they actually control. Stoicism teaches this. Life is a series of uncertainties. Everything out there, wealth, status, even the person you love, is beyond your control. The only thing you truly own is your mind and your response. But you never trained that mind. You invested everything into your work, your social roles, but neglected yourself. And when the storm hit, you were like a boat that never learned to row, now tossed in a sea of emotion. No one had to sink you. You sank yourself, not because you were weak, but because you were never prepared to break. We often admire the men who rise from the ruins, but before they stood up, they lay there for a long time, raw, wrecked, questioning everything they once believed. And if you're lying there now, that's okay, because that's where rebirth begins. But to be reborn, you must understand one thing. You are not the roles you once held, because as long as you still think of yourself as the provider, the breadwinner, the successful one, you're placing your identity in someone else's hands, letting them decide if you still matter. And that's what we need to confront next. There's a kind of man that society praises and then abandons the moment he can't play that role anymore. He was once the provider, the one who made the money, the one who took care of it all. But that used to be is a death sentence for his identity when that role disappears. Countless men spent their youth carrying burdens, carrying the family, carrying the finances, carrying the responsibility. They kept quiet, never complained, never asked for help, never stopped, because they believed it was their duty. No one taught them how to love themselves. No one told them, being a man doesn't mean dying under someone else's weight. And eventually, that burden crushes them. I've seen many men collapse not because they were weak, but because they believed that if they couldn't create material value, they were nothing. They stopped seeing themselves as worthy of love once they lost their job. They couldn't look their children in the eye when they couldn't pay tuition. They felt useless when they couldn't support their ex-wife after the divorce. Their entire identity was defined by what they could do for others. And when they could no longer do it, that meant they no longer existed. In Stoicism, Marcus Aurelius called this the illusion of identifying with external roles. That's the trap of living dependent on externals. When you see yourself as a wallet, a money machine, a provider, you let others decide whether or not you have value. You hand over your identity to someone else, and when they no longer need you, you destroy yourself. A man who once stood at the top of his career falls into depression after retirement. A father who raised his children drinks every night once they grow up and drift away. A husband who once carried all the finances gets no calls after the divorce. All of them show the same symptom. They don't know who they are if they're no longer the one who carries the load. Epictetus once said, "Everything outside your mind does not belong to you. The only thing you truly own is your response." And yet we define ourselves by things we can lose at any moment: money, roles, titles. And when those things vanish, we panic, feel empty, lost. What you need is not to keep the old role, but to build an identity that doesn't depend on it. To be a human being, not a function. To be character, not just capability. To be grounded, not just useful. As long as you define yourself by what you do for others, you will live in fear of being abandoned. But when you start living as someone with intrinsic worth, no one, not even life, can take that from you. And that is true freedom for a man. There's one thing many middle-aged men never dare to do: admit they're in pain. They can endure losing assets, broken marriages, estranged children, but they'll never say the words, "I need help." They're afraid of being judged, they're afraid of being seen as weak. And that fear runs so deep that, even as they're sinking into the abyss, they still hold their breath and endure it alone. Because from a young age, men were trained with a toxic belief. Weakness is shameful. Complaining is pathetic. Every negative emotion must be buried. Every hardship must be carried alone. That's how they grow up, become husbands, fathers, providers, in a world where every time they want to break down, they're reminded, man up. And eventually, these men forget how to breathe. They live like they're already dead, existing in silence until their mind is completely devoured. This is a form of self-isolation, what Epictetus called exiling oneself into misery from the delusion that strength means silence. In the Discourses he wrote, "The strong man is not the one who bears everything alone. He's the one who knows where to lay down the burden and who to share the pain with." Stoicism does not teach men to be rigid as stone. It teaches calm, resilience. But that doesn't mean freezing your emotions or rejecting connection. You are not weak for admitting you're hurt. You're not pathetic for saying, "I need someone to listen." You're not inferior for reaching out. It only means you still want to live, still want to move forward. The real danger comes when you've been silent for so long that even you can no longer hear yourself. I've met men who seemed fine on the outside. Neat, go to work every day, still smile in conversation. But when you sit down with them and ask just one question, "Are you okay?" all their armor cracks in an instant. They were just pretending to live. Inside is a storm of loneliness, disappointment, and the feeling that no one needs them anymore. They don't lack money, they lack being heard. If you are that man, I don't need you to tell your whole life story, but start with one small thing. Admit to yourself that you're tired. And if today someone asks you, "Is something wrong?" don't smile and deflect like always. Try saying one honest sentence, "I'm not doing so well." That person may not be able to save you, but by speaking those words, you've opened a door back to life. Stoicism is not about enduring in silence until death. Stoicism is about staring suffering in the face, touching it, and finding a way to walk through it. And that path often begins with one of the simplest acts: speaking up. Many men don't fall because the crisis was too big. They fall because they spent all their energy trying to control what was never theirs to control. They rage because others don't behave the way they expect. They suffer because of betrayal, because their children don't listen, because their wife left even after they did everything. They feel helpless, not because they didn't try, but because they placed all their effort in the wrong place. They poured their minds into uncertainty and then collapsed when it turned against them. This is a common mistake and a dangerous trap. When you believe you can control outcomes, control people, control life, you're living in illusion. And when that illusion shatters, you don't just feel disappointed, you feel worthless. You think, if I gave everything and still couldn't keep my family together, then maybe I'm nothing. But the truth is, you were wrong from the start because you're trying to steer a boat with no rudder. In Stoic philosophy, this is the foundational concept known as the dichotomy of control. Epictetus stated it clearly. Some things are within our control, some things are not. Knowing the difference is the key to living freely and in peace. You can control your actions, your attitude, your choices, your principles, but you cannot control outcomes, other people's emotions, or life's reactions. Yet modern men are fed the opposite, that if you're good enough, strong enough, persistent enough, you'll keep everything. Love, career, family, children. But life doesn't play by rules of fairness. Some people do everything right and still get betrayed. Some fathers love their kids deeply and still get hated. And if you don't know what truly belongs to you, then when those things are gone, you'll lose yourself with them. I once saw a father stripped of custody after a divorce. He couldn't accept it. He went to court every day, filed appeals, wrote letters to his child, and when none were answered, he fell into despair. But what hurt him most wasn't losing the child. It was the feeling of helplessness, the feeling of I no longer control anything. It wasn't until he accepted, I don't control the court's decision. I don't control the child's mother. I only control how I behave and the kindness I continue to send to my child, even if I can't see them, that he started to regain calm. And slowly, he began to live again, not through results, but through inner agency. Stoicism doesn't teach us to be indifferent to life, but it teaches us to let go of what isn't ours, so we can preserve our power for what we truly command. That's the mind, the morals, the choices, the character. That's where you must stand. Because if you keep living at the edge between expectation and reality, you'll be pulled into madness before you even notice. The sad truth is, most men are never taught this boundary. They're only taught, keep trying, and you'll keep it. But they're never taught, if you lose what you never had control over, don't destroy yourself with it. And that's the lesson we need to relearn before it's too late. People often ask men, how's work? Was this month's paycheck good? Been investing in anything lately? But it's rare for anyone to sincerely ask, are you okay? And because no one asks, over time, men stop answering. They stop talking. They smile to get it over with. They bury the panic attacks, the sleepless nights, the silent tears behind closed doors. And at some unknown point, they begin to die, not physically, but spiritually. There's a kind of pain that makes no sound. It doesn't scream, doesn't cry out, it just sits quietly, festering, and eats you alive piece by piece. You still go to work, still pay your bills on time, still call your mom for New Year's. But inside, you no longer feel alive. You feel like you're the lead in a movie that plays on repeat, each day a meaningless copy of the last. Dying slowly in silence. That's what Stoic philosophers called the internal rot that comes from losing connection to the logos, the rational essence within yourself. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, a soul that abandons itself is no longer a soul. It's just a breathing shell. When a man lives without feeling truly seen or understood, he starts losing that connection and slowly becomes that shell. Worse still, modern society praises that silence as some kind of fortitude. They call it resilience. They say that's what being a man means. And men, not wanting to bother anyone, not wanting to seem weak, choose the easiest path, silence. But that silence isn't peace. It's a black hole that swallows every thought, every feeling, every hope, and sometimes even the will to live. I once met a man who looked fine. Decent house, family intact, stable job. But after just one question, who do you see yourself as right now? He broke down in tears. He said, I don't know. No one's asked me that in so long. I haven't even dared to ask myself. Turns out, for years, he had only been performing a role. He'd never actually lived as a real human being. We don't have to be therapists to help a man on the brink. Sometimes all it takes is asking, "Are you okay?" and being willing to hear the honest answer. Sometimes all it takes is staying with him without pushing him to be okay right away. Because for men, a safe place to be seen is so rare, it's become a luxury. Epictetus said, "We are beings made for relationship. No one can live by reason while living apart from others." So if you're reading this and see yourself in these lines, I hope you remember, you don't have to be strong all the time. You just need to be honest enough to admit you're still alive and you still need to be seen. That's not weakness. That's the beginning of rebirth. This isn't just a video. This is the reminder you needed today. Hit subscribe and like if you want someone in your corner pushing you to live by your real values. Middle-aged men don't collapse because they're too weak. They collapse because they've held on too long to things that were never theirs to carry. They try to keep a woman who's already left them. Try to hold on to a child who's been turned against them. Try to prove to society that they still matter. They thrash like trapped animals, not from the instinct to survive, but because no one ever taught them how to let go. We grew up with a flawed belief that the more we try to control, the more happiness we'll get. But the brutal truth is, the more you cling to what's not yours, the more you lose what truly matters. Control your wife, and she'll leave. Control your child, and they'll drift away. Control your reputation with anger, and you'll earn only contempt. In Stoic philosophy, the first and most vital foundation is the concept of the dichotomy of control, knowing what you can and cannot control. Epictetus wrote, "Some things are within our power: beliefs, attitude, will, actions. The rest, money, reputation, others' love, are not." And the man who understands this is the one who begins to step out of the cycle of suffering. Many divorced men still cling to the question, "Why did she treat me like that?" They lose sleep for months trying to prove they were right, trying to reason with someone who no longer loves them. But they don't see, love is not in your control. You can love someone deeply, but you can't force them to love you back. That is their freedom, and your pain comes from not accepting that truth. A father once cried in my arms because his 14-year-old daughter said straight to his face, "I hate you." She lived with her mother after the divorce, poisoned against him for years. What hurt the man wasn't just the words. It was the feeling of helplessness, the sense that he was no longer the father he believed he was. But I asked him one thing: "Can you control your daughter's thoughts?" He went silent, then collapsed, because he knew the answer, but he had never forced himself to face it. We suffer because of expectation, and expectation thrives best in the things we don't control. You expect others to understand your heart. Expect your child to appreciate your efforts. Expect life to be fair. But Stoicism teaches, when you let go of what doesn't belong to you, you regain yourself. Freedom, in the Stoic view, isn't doing whatever you want. It's letting go of everything that no longer serves your inner peace. When you know what is your responsibility and what belongs to the world, you stop carrying it all. You become clear. You focus on the one thing you truly own: how you act, respond, choose, and preserve your dignity. I used to write out 2 lists every morning. On one side, things I can control. On the other, things I can't. That alone saved me from dozens of breakdowns. I can't control my ex-wife's attitude, but I can control how respectfully I face her. I can't control the outcome of legal battles, but I can control the kindness I show in every document I write. I can't control others' emotions, but I can control my calm when I'm attacked. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. Letting go means pulling your hand back from what isn't yours, to save what you've been dropping, yourself. If you're lost right now, crushed under chaos with no way out, stop. Sit down and write out 2 lists, one with the things you can change through action, the other with things you can't change, no matter how hard you try. Then accept, with honesty, pain, and courage, that everything in that second column needs to be let go. Because if you don't let go, it will drag you down. But if you do, you'll rise, lighter, clearer, and begin to live like a free man, not because he owns everything, but because he's stopped clinging to what never belonged to him. There's a silent fear that most middle-aged men carry deep down. It's the fear of being worthless if they no longer make money. The value once built from account balances, monthly salary figures, and the ability to provide for wife and children vanishes in an instant after one event: losing a job, a divorce, or bankruptcy. And when that happens, a man doesn't just lose his finances, he loses his sense of who he is. I've met too many men like that. Men who once stood at the top, now sitting alone at a roadside cafe. No one calls, no one checks in. Their phone used to ring all day because they were someone who could make things happen. But now, without money, suddenly no one needs them anymore. That silence isn't because they did anything wrong. It's because this society subconsciously defines men by their ability to generate material value. From a young age, men are taught, if you don't have a career, no one will respect you. As you grow up, you're praised for buying a house, a car, sending your kid to a private school. You're the pride of the family when you land a big deal. But if one day you lose it all, no one remembers who you used to be. And the scariest part is, you don't even know who you are anymore. Marcus Aurelius, a great emperor and a Stoic philosopher, once wrote in Meditations, "Fame, wealth, status, they're all foam on the surface. A man's true nature is revealed in how he behaves when there's nothing left to protect." He ruled the most powerful empire in Rome, yet lived simply, wore coarse clothing, and wrote daily about humility and self-control. Because he knew, true value doesn't lie in what others see, it lies in how you live when no one's watching. We live in an era where income is a religion. Poverty is seen as failure, unemployment as incompetence, divorce and losing everything as being useless. But all of that is just a coat of paint. It's not you. You are not the money you make. You are how you react when you lose that money. You are your integrity when no one is looking. You are your dignity when there's nothing left to prove. And if you don't learn to separate yourself from your income, you'll always feel inferior, no matter how much you earn. I once saw a man sell his last home to pay for his child's medical treatment. He later lost his job, his wife left him, and he lived in a 12-square-meter room. But every time I saw him care for that child, I knew he hadn't lost value. On the contrary, he was living the deepest truth of being human. Sacrifice, love, and courage. Not a cent in his wallet, and still a good father. Epictetus, born a slave with nothing in his hands, became one of the most influential philosophers in history. He once said, "True value lies not in your circumstances, but in how you respond to them." Maybe you no longer earn 6 figures, but if you still live with discipline, maintain your self-respect, and can still say thank you and I'm sorry, then you've never lost your worth. What you need to do isn't scramble to make more money just to feel worthy of existing. It's to sit down and ask yourself, if I lost everything tomorrow, who would I still be? If that question leaves you silent, then it's time to redefine yourself. Redefining doesn't mean denying the value of money. It means putting money in its rightful place, as a tool, not your identity. It helps you live, but it doesn't define who you are. It can be lost, but if you still have an honest heart, a clear mind, and a calm presence, then you still have everything. And once you know your value doesn't come from your bank balance, you'll stop fearing loss. And when you no longer fear loss, that's when you're truly free. No longer controlled by society's expectations, no longer living to please anyone, no longer needing to prove anything. You just live as a man who's returned to himself. And that is the greatest power a middle-aged man can possess. Staying calm in peaceful times is easy. What's hard is staying composed when life punches you in the face. What's hard is not losing it when your ex turns on you in court. What's hard is not smashing a glass when your child, the one you love most, refuses to speak to you because of someone else's influence. What's hard is when your career crumbles, people change, and you're sitting alone in an old room with nothing left but the sound of your own breath. But that's exactly when a man's true character is forged. Not in moments of applause, but in moments of loss, isolation, betrayal, and the realization that you control none of it. There's only one thing left in your hands: your reaction. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire, wrote in Meditations, "If you're angry at something outside your control, you're giving it control over you." Stoicism never taught us to pretend to be okay. It teaches us to train our inner world so it's not shaken by the outer one. Not by denying emotion, but by observing it, understanding it, and choosing a response that doesn't make you a victim of yourself. I remember sitting in court, hearing the opposing lawyer twist the truth about me in front of my son. The boy looked at me with unfamiliar eyes. In that moment, I wanted to stand up, slam the table, scream in rage, but I stopped. I thought of Epictetus's words, "No one can insult you unless you let them." I stayed still, fists clenched beneath the table, and looked at that boy, not with pain, but with patience, because I knew it wasn't his fault, and my reaction, right then, would shape everything that followed. The ability to stay calm in adversity doesn't come from being naturally strong. It's a skill you have to train every day. Like a muscle, if you don't use it, it weakens. Stoics practice something called negative visualization, imagining loss ahead of time. Each morning they'd ask, if I lose my wife, my child, my wealth, my status today, what will remain? Not to grieve, but to prepare. So when life truly does take those things, they won't panic, because they've already faced it in their mind. You can practice this daily. Before a tough conversation, pause for 1 minute. Close your eyes, breathe deeply. Imagine the worst-case scenario, and quietly ask, if that happens, how will I respond in a way that doesn't betray myself? That one simple question has saved me during moments where one emotional outburst could have shattered everything. The more adversity you face, the more you need calm. Because that calm is a weapon, not to defeat others, but to stop yourself from becoming the loser in your own soul. When you react like someone out of control, you let adversity become your master. But when you stay rational, you're still the one steering the ship, even in a storm. I know, it's easier said than done, but Stoicism was never about theory. It's about practice. It's about falling, getting back up, and trying again. It's about losing your temper yesterday, but today learning to pause 5 seconds before saying something you'll regret. It's about turning every hardship, not into an enemy, but into a training ground for your inner strength. Seneca once wrote, "It's not because the world is harsh that we suffer. It's because we are soft and untrained." And if you don't want to spend the rest of your life in bitterness, rage, and regret, then start training the one thing you can truly master: your inner state. Adversity won't stop coming, but you can stop yourself before it devours you. And when you've learned to stay calm, no matter the insult, the chaos, or the betrayal, you become a man who life can no longer shake. Because you no longer try to control the world, you control yourself. And to the Stoic, that is the greatest victory a man can achieve. After major upheavals, many men fall into such deep disorientation that they no longer know who they are. They used to be a father, a husband, a breadwinner, a pillar, and now there's no role left to play. They don't know why they're waking up in the morning, don't know what to wear, what to eat, where to go. They stand still in the same house they've lived in for 10 years, looking around like a stranger. Everything once familiar now feels hollow. At that point, hollow advice like "find yourself again" sounds ridiculous. Find it where? Who is this self anyway? The man who lost everything? The defeated shadow curled up in the corner? But within those shards, Stoicism opens a very different door. Not a door of abstract philosophy, but a path. Concrete, small, slow, but steady. Begin again with small actions. Epictetus said, "We are what we repeatedly do." So it is not words but actions that define who you are. He didn't tell you to become a strong man overnight. He said, tidy your desk, fold your blanket, walk for 15 minutes each morning. Write down 3 things you're grateful for before bed. Small, but real, and consistent. After the shock of losing my family, I spent 3 months doing nothing but staring at the ceiling. Then one day I woke up earlier than usual. Not to do anything grand, but simply because I wanted to make a cup of coffee by hand instead of pressing a machine button. That was the first intentional act I'd done in 3 months. And strangely, holding that cup in my hand, I felt I still exist. I can still do something, even something small for myself. Since then, each day, I chose one very small task to do with care. Cleaning dusty shoes, washing the familiar cup, taking a walk without holding my phone. Each small act was like a brick, and I laid them one by one to rebuild a self that life had torn down. No applause, no one noticed, but I began to see myself again. No longer the one who was abandoned, no longer the man who lost his job, but a man trying to live with dignity step by step. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself, "Don't get lost in the crowd. Do small things as if your whole life depends on them." He was an emperor, yet he still wrote in his journal every night, still woke up at dawn to meditate, because he understood, greatness doesn't come from big events. It comes from small, consistent, meaningful actions. Stoicism teaches to change your fate. Don't start by convincing the world. Start by cleaning the sink. Sit up straight. Stop delaying the first 5 minutes of your day. Not for anyone, not to be seen. Because small actions, done the right way, create the man you're trying to find again. If you're lost in your own life, stop trying to figure out who you are. That question is too big. Just do one small thing, and do it like it's the last thing left that lets you live truthfully. Fold your shirt neatly, brew a pot of tea, and sit in silence. Call an old friend, not to complain, but to ask how they've been. These small acts are the rope that pulls you out of the mud. Because, as Seneca once said, life is a series of acts, and a noble man is not made by reputation, but by how he handles the smallest things every day. No one loses themselves in one day, and no one finds themselves in one sudden awakening. You can only find yourself through each action, small repeated, with intention, with dignity, with discipline. And one day, you'll look back and see, the man who once collapsed is now standing tall again. Not because someone saved him, but because he chose to come back to life through the very things that once seemed meaningless. And that is real strength, a strength no one can take away. I know you've thought about giving up, not because you're weak, but because you've carried too much, fought too long, and no one truly understands the war inside you. There are days when you wake up and see no reason to leave the bed. You look around, no one left to carry, no one left to impress, and you ask yourself, why am I even here anymore? But if you're still watching this, it means you haven't fully let go. It means there's still a part of you, very small, that hasn't accepted defeat. And that part, no matter how faint, is the spark that can reignite your entire life. The journey through darkness doesn't begin with some grand push. It begins with the courage to stand up again, even when your heart still hurts. The courage to make yourself a cup of coffee, to walk for 10 minutes in silence, to look in the mirror and not turn away. Every small step is another blow against giving up. Every step is you reclaiming one final piece of sovereignty over your life. And I want you to know, you're not walking alone. I'm walking beside you, step by step, breath by breath. Not to cheer you on, but to remind you, we don't fall here, brother. Thank you for being here. If you found this video helpful, subscribe, turn on notifications, and like this video. Don't forget to leave a comment so we can spread positivity together.